First story is it's a sad story, and it's about Julian Assange. And WikiLeaks, we remember last week, released a statement saying that they had information that Ecuador was getting ready to hand him over. And Ecuador released saying, hey, we're not doing that. Turns out WikiLeaks was right again. WikiLeaks was right again. So I just want to show, so you know that this is prosecution of journalism. Because what Julian Assange did was publish, just like the Washington Times when they published the Pentagon Papers. The Washington Post, just like when they published the Pentagon Papers, they're publishers. And you never hold publishers. You never do that. You always let them publish. And so what they're trying to do is say Julian Assange assisted Chelsea Manning in stealing documents from the government in 2010. He didn't. But that's why they tortured Chelsea Manning, was to get Chelsea to say he did. And she wouldn't do it. And Chelsea's right back in solitary confinement again over this very thing. So they want Chelsea to turn on Julian Assange and lie. And she won't do it. And she's willing to go through torture. That's a strong person. So this is the criminal. So all those people who were screaming about Jim Acosta and Trump is the enemy of journalism, this is the real enemy of journalism. This is Trump really being the enemy of journalism, and all the quote-unquote corporate journalists are getting it wrong once again. Guess who's not getting it wrong? Tulsi Gabbard. The purpose of arresting Julian Assange is to send a message to the people, especially journalists, to be quiet and don't get out of line. If we, the people, allow the government to control us through fear, we are no longer free. We are no longer America. This is our crisis, not the pretend Russia crisis that every jagoff in the world has been screaming at the top of their lungs about for the last 3 years with zero evidence. And people who are still screaming about it still have zero evidence. They're lunatics and they're out of their minds. And you should stop listening to them. And you should start listening to people like Tulsi Gabbard, who is not equivocating. She's telling you straight up what this is. I'm sure Bernie's going to equivocate. I'm sure everybody else is going to equivocate on this. I'm crossing my fingers they don't. This is a real leader. That's a real leader. And it's also funny to see that some people today sticking up very loudly for Julian Assange who've been silent over the last 3 years. Isn't that interesting? Did you notice that? I noticed that. I noticed some people who want you to think they're progressive, who are now all on board for Julian Assange and freedom of the press. That's weird because those people have been silent for the last 3 years.
Well, and they certainly have been busy talking about Russia.
That's right. This is from TruthDig. The Trump administration will seek to try Julian Assange on charges that he conspired with Bradley Manning in 2010 to steal the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs obtained by WikiLeaks. So keep in mind what this is. This has nothing to do with the last election. This has nothing to do with Russia. This has nothing to do with the Podesta emails. This has nothing to do with the WikiLeaks. This has nothing to do with the DNC server or Donna Brazil or Hillary Clinton or the dossier, or Donald Trump. This has nothing to do with Trump, Russia, Clinton, nothing. This has to do with war crimes that the United States was committing on the regular, that Chelsea Manning exposed through WikiLeaks. That's what this is about. And you listen to the news coverage, you don't even hear that. This has nothing to do with anything from the last couple of years. This has to do with from 2010. The 500,000 internal documents leaked by Chelsea Manning from the Pentagon and the State Department, along with a 2007 video of the United States helicopter pilots nonchalantly gunning down Iraqi civilians, including children, and 2 Reuters journalists provided copious evidence of the hypocrisy, indiscriminate violence, and routine use of torture, lies, bribery, and crude tactics of intimidation by the U.S. government in its foreign relations and wars in the Middle East. So what this is here, this video, this 2007 video, that was that video where that was video from a United States helicopter, and they're killing people with these huge rounds, just smearing them and slaughtering them, and then they come back and they do a double tap. So that's when we found out what a double tap was. So then when the Red Cross or whoever comes to help the people who are injured, they kill them too. Those are war crimes. Those are crimes against humanity. You're not supposed to do that. They killed journalists, and they laughed about it on video. That's what. And so when Chelsea Manning saw that, Chelsea Manning actually has a conscience like a human being, and said the American people need to know the crimes that are being committed in their name. And that's what happened. And now everybody in Washington, D.C. wants to kill Julian Assange because he blew the whistle on the war machine. He also blew the whistle on the Democratic Convention, the DNC, how corrupt they were. John Podesta, how corrupt they were. Debbie Wasserman Schultz had to step down because of WikiLeaks. Assange and WikiLeaks allowed us to see the inner workings of empire, which is the most important role of the press. And for this, they became empire's prey. Once the documents and videos provided by Manning to Assange and WikiLeaks were published and disseminated by news organizations such as the New York Times, The Guardian, the press callously and foolishly turned on Assange. So people don't realize that New York Times and The Guardian published some of this stuff. They were all working together with WikiLeaks and Chelsea. And then as soon as they stopped, and then they turned on Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. So once the documents and videos provided by Manning and Assange and WikiLeaks were published and disseminated by news organizations such as the New York Times and The Guardian, they covered it. They didn't ignore what Julian Assange published. They covered it. The press callously and foolishly turned on Julian Assange. News organizations that had run WikiLeaks material over several days soon served as conduits in a black propaganda campaign to discredit Assange and WikiLeaks. That's journalists turning on journalism at the behest of the establishment, because that's who journalists work for. They work for the establishment. And guess who doesn't? Julian Assange. Look what they did to him. Guess who doesn't? Us. Look what they do to us. And by the way, I'm not making any comparison between me and Julian Assange or WikiLeaks at all. At all. I'm just saying that journalists smear other journalists who don't work for the establishment. And we don't work for the establishment. So journalists smear us. Julian Assange does not work for the establishment. He exposes the establishment. So journalists work to smear him because journalists work for the establishment. And please don't think that I was ever trying to compare anything above this show with WikiLeaks or Julian Assange. That was not what I was doing. I was saying that even on a small scale, I noticed that. Even on a small scale, I noticed that. Low-level reporters at CNN would take time out of their day to smear low-level YouTube people. Why the F would they do that? That's because they work for the establishment, and the establishment told them to. And that's what's wrong with journalism. And that's what's wrong. Half the YouTubers want to be part of that club. The coordinated smear campaign was detailed in a leaked Pentagon document prepared by the Cyber Counterintelligence Assessment Branch and was dated March 8, 2008. The document called on the United States to eradicate the feeling of trust that is WikiLeaks' center of gravity and destroy Assange's reputation. So do you see what they're saying here? Do you see what this is? So they weren't going to go after Julian Assange legally. They just wanted to go after him and smear him. That's what they do. Again, we saw it on a very small scale, but that's what they do. They immediately start smearing that person. And that's what they did. So the government wanted to smear him and ruin his reputation and eradicate the feeling of trust that citizens had for WikiLeaks. People trusted them. They wanted to make you not trust them. And Barack Obama, I don't know if you remember, he repealed the law that made it illegal for the United States government to do propaganda on their own people. So now they can. So if they want to make you think WikiLeaks is bad, even though WikiLeaks is your friend, they can do propaganda on you now. Assange, who with the Manning leaks has exposed the war crimes, lies, and criminal manipulations of the George W. Bush administration, soon earned the ire of the Democratic Party establishment by publishing 70,000 hacked emails belonging to the Democratic National Committee and senior Democratic officials. The emails were copied from the accounts of John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman. The Podesta emails exposed, and why does the Clinton campaign hate Julian Assange? Why does the establishment hate Julian Assange? Why does MSNBC, who carries water for the Democratic Party, hate Julian Assange? Why? This is why. Because the Podesta emails exposed the donation of millions of dollars from Saudi Arabia and Qatar, two of the major funders of Islamic State, to the Clinton Foundation. So the same people who are funding the Islamic State also funding the Clinton Foundation to the tune of millions of dollars. What else did Julian Assange do? And WikiLeaks? Well, it exposed the $657,000 that Goldman Sachs paid to Hillary Clinton to give talks, a sum so large it can only be considered a bribe. That's why they want to kill Julian Assange. It exposed Clinton's repeated mendacity. How? Well, she was caught in the emails, for example, telling the financial elites that she wanted open trade and open borders and believed Wall Street executives were best positioned to manage the economy, a statement that contradicted her campaign statements. Remember, she had a private position and a public position. That was revealed. Meaning she lies to the people and tells her donors the truth. That's what that means. I have a public position and a private. The private position is the real one. That's who I tell my banker donors. And the public one is the lie, which I tell the people I want to vote for me. So now you see what this is. That they've been wanting to get him ever since this. You realize, right? He exposes war crimes of George W. Bush. He exposes unbelievable mendacity of the Clinton campaign and the Clinton Foundation and the Democratic National Committee. He's making some powerful enemies. It exposed the Clinton campaign's effort to influence the Republican primaries to ensure that Trump was the Republican nominee. It exposed Clinton's advanced knowledge of questions in a primary debate. So now that's how we know that Hillary Clinton made sure Donald Trump was her opponent and he became president. It's actually Hillary Clinton's fault. Everyone knows that, but no one actually talks about it because that's an inconvenient truth. It's probably my fault. It's probably my fault or Jill Stein or Susan Sarandon's or somebody else with no money and no power. And not the person who's in bed with Saudi Arabia to the tune of millions of dollars. They don't have any power, do they? Or the person who gets $600,000 for a speech. They don't have any power at Wall Street, do they? Probably me. Probably Jill Stein, Susan Sarandon. Somebody else with absolutely no money and no power. That's how ridiculous people are still to this day. It exposed that Hillary Clinton as the primary architect of the war in Libya, a war she believed would burnish her credentials as a presidential candidate. Journalists can argue that this information, like the war logs, should have remained hidden, but they can't then call themselves journalists. And they're not journalists. You know that most of the people in America who call themselves journalists are not journalists. They're mouthpieces and beards for the establishment. And if anything, doing this show for the last I've been doing this show since 2009. But if anything, the last 3 years has exposed journalism to be mouthpieces of the establishment. The Democratic leadership, intent on blaming Russia for its election loss, charges that the Podesta emails were obtained by Russian government hackers. Although James Comey, the former FBI director, has conceded that the emails were probably delivered to WikiLeaks by an intermediary. Assange has said, we've been saying that for 3 goddamn years, ever since Bill Binney came on this show and told us that those emails were not hacked. That did not happen over the internet. That was download. I knew how to get a hold of Bill Binney. I guess nobody, the rest of the people at MSNBC or CNN or the New York Times, they didn't know how to get a hold of Bill Binney, or anybody else on YouTube didn't know how to get a hold of Bill Binney, the #1 NSA code breaker.
How did we ever do it?
How did I do it? How do I know how to get a hold of Bill Binney and none of those other people know how to get a hold of him? Or how about I got a hold of John Kiriakou, who broke this the torture scandal from inside the CIA? I was able to get a hold of him. Chris Hayes doesn't have his number. The huge YouTube shows that cover this breathlessly, constantly, 24/7, they don't have his number. So if there's one thing that has been revealed through this is that most of the journalists in America are not journalists. Most of the journalists in America are beards and mouthpieces for the establishment, just like Chomsky told us. Assange has said the emails were not provided by the state actors. James Comey said they were probably delivered to WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks has done more to expose the abuses and of power and crimes of the American empire than any other news organization. And that's the guy that all the other journalists hate. I wonder why. It's because he's scooping them. I know what it's like to scoop a news organization and get their ire. I know what that's like. I know what that's like. People don't like it when you come into their newsroom and do a better job than they do. Right in their fucking face. They don't like it. I know that firsthand. So WikiLeaks has done more to expose the crimes of the powerful and the crimes of the American empire than any other news organization. And that's the guy that's in prison right now. In addition to the war logs and the Podesta emails, it made public, meaning WikiLeaks, made public the hacking tools used by the CIA and the National Security Agency and their interference in foreign elections, including in the French elections. So this he's making enemies. CIA hates him. Clinton hates him. Bush hates him. The military-industrial complex wants to kill this guy. That's what a journalist does. He makes powerful enemies. You know what a journalist doesn't do? What Jim Acosta and everybody at CNN and MSNBC does. It disclosed the internal WikiLeaks exposed the internal conspiracy against British Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn by Labour members of Parliament. WikiLeaks intervened to save Edward Snowden, who made public the wholesale surveillance of the American public by our own intelligence agencies from extradition to the United States by helping him flee from Hong Kong to Moscow. The Snowden leaks also revealed that Assange was on a U.S. manhunt target list. We all must resist. This is Chris Hedges. He ends his article by saying this. He says, we all must resist. We must, in every way possible, put pressure on the British government to halt the judicial lynching of Assange. If Assange is extradited and tried, it will create a legal precedent that will terminate the ability of the press, which Trump repeatedly has called the enemy of the people, to hold power accountable. So, if this is allowed to stand, this legal precedent will terminate the ability of the press to hold power accountable. The crimes of war and finance, the persecution of dissidents, minorities, and immigrants, the pillaging by corporations of the nation and the ecosystem, and the ruthless impoverishment of working men and women to swell the bank accounts of the rich and consolidate the global oligarchs' total grip on power will not only expand because of this, but will no longer be part of the public debate. First Assange, then us. So there you go. That's what's really happening. That's what's really happening, and it's happening right now, right out in the open. And you got every jagoff at every cable news station misinforming you, but they're doing their job. That's their job. Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow and Chris Matthews and fake tough guy Lawrence O'Donnell are there to misinform you on purpose. Jake Tapper is there to misinform you on purpose. That's why they're there. That's why we have a show. Because if they were doing their job, why would you have to come here? They're not doing their job. They're the mouthpiece and the beards of the establishment, which is what Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow and Jake Tapper and Anderson Cooper are. Anderson Cooper, wow, somebody from the Vanderbilt family isn't going to give me the truth about the real news that working people need to hear? A member of the Vanderbilt family and a former intern at the CIA is now at the CNN, and he's not giving me the straight dope? That's weird. There's one person that I know of for sure who's talking straight about this. We saw people like Ro Khanna defending Ro Khanna, who, a great progressive, and then he does that thing where he pushes Russiagate and defends Rachel Maddow. I hope he gets this one right because there's not many people left in government that are worth a goddamn. Ro Khanna is one of them. He's definitely worth a goddamn. And that's why I hope he gets this right because we're losing now. This is it. This is the end of the game.
Jimmy, Justin B. came in from the Super Chat, and he said the Green and the Libertarian parties are the only parties standing against the arrest of Julian Assange. If you lean to the right, I'll urge you to consider the Libertarian Party. If you're with me on the left, then #DemExit and #Green enter today.
So the Democratic Party is in favor of this, and this is the party that Bernie is telling people to join. That's not good. As far as I can tell. This party is corrupt to its core. And right now, this party's cheating progressives right here in California. We're going to do a story on it. They're cheating us again. We had the delegate count we had a vote a couple weeks ago. They just cheated. They got rid of the progressives. The Democratic Party in California. That's another thing Bernie ignored when it happened 2 years ago. He ignored it. He ignored when he got cheated by the DNC. And I hope he stands up now and bucks the Democratic Party. And I hope he stands up for Julian Assange in no uncertain terms, like a real leader. Next live Jimmy Dore show is June 5th. That's a Wednesday at Hermosa Beach Comedy Club in Hermosa Beach, California. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets. We might be coming to your town. And if you love the show, please become a patron. Please support the show. We give you hours of bonus material every week. And please click that bell and make sure you're subscribed. Even if you think you are already subscribed, they unsubscribe people every day. Just check. Thanks for your support.